At the time of the COVID outbreak, the government was under pressure in the areas of property development and housing. The social housing waitlist had more than doubled since they were elected. After an inauspicious beginning, KiwiBuild was in so-called reset mode. Affordability of houses and land was an issue. There were yet more changes planned for the RMA. And there was a homeless problem that the population and the government seemed to have largely accepted. So what was the effect of the COVID outbreak on the housing landscape? Is there a willingness to do things differently?
I see this as being an incredible potential at the moment because during a crisis, communities pull together and we really start to work as one, and we see that we need to do things in a very fast manner. So this whole collaborative talking to each other, networking, making sure that we're communicating is really important. We're at a crossroads. We can either say, oh, that was just then and go back to business as usual, or we can actually have the courage to say, look, we've known these challenges, and they're not new ones. You know, these trends have been coming through for a long time. COVID is just the storm that's given us the opportunity to actually act on them and act on them fast, and I think we have to take it.
Ironically, after years of inaction, when COVID struck, it was the homeless problem that was dealt with first. Reasonably quickly, the government allocated around $100 million to house the homeless in motels, allowing for up to 1,600 motel units to be available for a year. Mostly for homeless people, but a proportion of these units have been given to people rehoused from situations of overcrowding. It's a response that seems to have worked, and the government has indicated that the homeless will remain housed long-term. So that's one positive byproduct of the pandemic. But what about other housing? Building consents did fall during lockdown. Will they bounce back?
The impact that COVID will have on the housing market is something that I'm tracking very closely. I'm very conscious of what happened after the global financial crisis, that we saw consents plummet. It did take a period of time. It probably wasn't until about 2013 that we saw the bottom of the consenting from that event. So we're tracking very closely what we think might happen. But the thing I am most determined is that we won't see the collapse of that affordable part of the market again.
I mean, one of the things that will inevitably come from this will be when we look at who was impacted and who was affected health-wise, we'll probably discover that people of lower socioeconomic status living in more dense surroundings are likely to end up being more affected. And even if it doesn't relate to COVID, it relates to health generally. And clearly there's a recognition of that. I suspect that increasingly there's a desire to not just recognise it, but there's actually a desire to maybe do something about it.
In other episodes of House Talk, we look at how higher density housing can avoid suburban sprawl out beyond existing town and city limits. But will COVID lead to a nervousness and a rethink around higher density apartment-style living?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because there were a few stories around at the beginning of the crisis to say that, you know, the outbreak is strongest in denser cities. And it's true that the infection rates were higher in places like New York. But I don't think in the longer term that makes denser living dangerous, because we can also see that the virus is spreading in anywhere that people gathered. And people gather, we're social creatures, we want to gather no matter what. New Zealand's biggest outbreaks were in bars and convention centres. They weren't in residential areas. I don't think the COVID-19 outbreak changes our housing needs in a radical way. And in fact, the healthier the houses are we build, the healthier our population will be.
There was going to be years of analysis of all the data, but Italy got hit really hard. Partly possibly because they often have the grandparents in the same house with them. So the grandpa and the grandma might be on the ground floor where they can come in and out easily. Parents on the next floor up and children on the top floors. That's a system of living together that the rest of the world has been looked at for ages and said, this is great, this is lovely. They don't put their parents in an old people's home, they keep them there with them. Of course, what they meant is that when the COVID virus struck, is that all of those old people living at home died. almost immediately. That was the key amount of people in Lombardy, were all the old people living at home.
And of course, the other building environments where people are close together for a reasonable length of time are their workplaces, and in particular, offices.
Space that people work in has become a lot smaller because we've become more efficient with floor plates until, of course, the last couple of months when we've decided that being close to each other is actually not that helpful, so we need to be slightly further apart.
And it would seem that some people are happy with that and keen to keep working for at least part of their week from home. And while it's too early to gauge the effect of this, it may mean that more office space could be converted to apartments. And over time, some changes in the interior layout of our houses to accommodate our home offices.
It's really interesting. COVID has developed a whole new set of considerations for us. We've learned more about what it means to work from home, what kind of environments we need to support that, but also more about society. We've learned that we actually can really achieve powerful things as we work together as a community. And I think we will start to see that if we can hold on to the lessons that we've learned through this period, we will start to see that impact the way that we live in our communities.
Well, look, I think it's too early to tell what social changes will come from COVID-19. Hopefully they'll be for the better. I think that perhaps we've helped renew our social contract in New Zealand by realising that we're all dependent on the efforts of others. And maybe that'll flow through to some societal expectations of fairness, including in the provision of housing to people that need it.
It's difficult to get much detail or consensus about the effect of COVID-19. People are engaged with the discussion, but are struggling to articulate a clear vision for the future. Perhaps it's too soon. Across this series, we've looked at housing styles and size, different models of ownership, increasing the proportion of rental stock, housing density, papakāinga, the role of councils and developers. Maybe in a post-COVID world, we can look at these differently and make some changes.
This program was made possible by the RNZ NZ On Air Innovation Fund.